Your badge doesn't work, said the security guard without looking up from his phone. It was 7:46 a.m. I hadn't had coffee. I hadn't even taken off my headphones. I blinked at the glass doors like they'd betrayed me, because just last night I was working inside them till 1:12 a.m. I knew that because the last Git push I made said hotfix, restore autoscaling for prod East 1. And now I was locked out. I stood there in my navy blazer, holding a banana, looking like a confused intern on her first day, except I was the woman who architected their goddamn cloud backbone from scratch, me. I wrote the zero trust config before the board knew what SAML even stood for. I texted HR, no reply, Slack, logged out. I tried to call my manager, Rishi, straight to voicemail. Then I noticed it, an email from payroll. No greeting, no signature. Just effective immediately. Title has been adjusted to Junior DevOps Coordinator to reflect alignment with your recent performance review. Compensation to remain unchanged. I felt my jaw lock. There hadn't even been a performance review. Then I remembered something that didn't make sense until that second. Last week, during a sprint retro, Rishi had joked that I should tone down the alpha energy because it's not a hackathon, it's a family. And then Lisa from finance giggled and said, maybe she'll get humbled by the system. We all do eventually. At the time, I thought they were being weirdly philosophical. Now, I realized they'd planned this. Gaslight the woman who never stayed late for drinks. Sideline the one who called out prod misconfigs during board demos. Strip the badge, cut the title, keep the output. But here's what they didn't know. That same week, while I was being too alpha, I'd quietly restructured every core deployment dependency to pass through a provisioning gateway I had root access to. On paper, that gateway belonged to a vendor listed as Larkspur Cloud LLC. And guess who legally incorporated Larkspur Cloud 18 months ago while helping finance restructure cloud procurement for liability mitigation? Me. So I walked away from the glass doors. Slowly, calmly. I passed the kombucha fridge, the beanbag meeting room, that stupid poster that said Velocity loves vulnerability, and I smiled. Because if they wanted to play compliance hardball, I'd show them what it really meant to be aligned with performance. The funny part? Larkspur Cloud wasn't even supposed to be real. It started as a placeholder. A joke, really. I came up with the name after Lisa. Yes, that Lisa from finance called me prickly but reliable, like a larkspur flower. I Googled it later. Larkspur's toxic to humans. Fitting. At the time, our CTO, Clay, had asked me to find a quick vendor route so they could route middleware provisioning through a third party. Something about liability shielding before the next audit. Just spin up something temporary, he'd said, sipping from a mug that said 10x engineer in progress while I was patching the Terraform scripts that kept breaking during rollout. We'll replace it later. Pinky swear. Never replaced it. Nobody ever audited it, and I never shut it down. Instead, I registered it as a Wyoming LLC, quiet state, no questions, and bought the cheapest domain I could find, Larkspur Cloud Dev. I made it look like a scrappy dev ops consultancy. Slapped a minimalist landing page on it with a fake case study. Even set up a chatbot named Jules that responded to RFPs with pre-written garbage. The brilliance. I billed them through a managed API gateway under the name of my actual employer, me. They just didn't know it. I watched as their entire infrastructure, from cron jobs to rollback scripts, slowly tethered to a thing they thought they owned. They didn't. But back then, it was harmless. I wasn't bitter, not yet. I just wanted a safety net, a pressure valve, something I could use if the elevator ever stopped going up. It stopped today. And now I had leverage. So I went home, logged into the Larkspur backend, watched the access logs spike like a heart monitor on meth. Jenkins builds, Helm charts, Docker polls, each ping a quiet little tribute to my ghost company. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I emailed procurement. Hey, small update. Our contractor, Larkspur, is revising pricing to align with current SLA demands and incident response requirements. New rate $1,500/hour retroactive to last Friday. You've hit 42 hours already. No threats. No drama, just math. I hit send and poured a glass of whiskey. Then I watched in real time as panic bloomed inside their Slack instance, which, oops, I still had admin access to via the alerting bot I built. Rishi, WTF is Larkspur and why are they billing $60K? Lisa, wasn't this Jules' vendor? I thought she left. Don't respond. Lupin Legal. Too late, Clay, way too late. Because by the time they figured out who Jules really was, I'd already tripled their burn rate, triggered the contract auto-renewal, and scheduled a lovely little DNS redirect if they missed the next invoice. Oh, and the cherry? My resignation letter, dated 3 days ago, was sitting in Legal's spam folder, flagged for excessive sarcasm. Tomorrow, they'd try to fight it. Tonight, I watched them burn. By the next morning, the vultures had found my scent. I woke up to 37 emails, 2 voicemails from an outside counsel, whose LinkedIn screamed former frat bro turned compliance mercenary, and a calendar invite from Lisa titled, Urgent. Realignment discussion, please join immediately realignment. That's corporate for we thought we could screw you, but now we're worried you kept the receipts. I clicked into the Zoom link wearing my softest robe, and an expression I save for funerals I don't particularly grieve. Lisa was already there, tight-lipped in her beige panic. Rishi joined a second later, fake casual in a hoodie, eyes darting like he was expecting the IRS to crawl through his vents. Then Clay appeared, hair slicked back like he'd just lost a bet to a hedge fund. Jules, Lisa began, tones soaked in artificial concern. I think there's been a misunderstanding about Larkspur's relationship to our systems. Misunderstanding implies someone knew what the hell they were agreeing to, I said, stirring my coffee. Which I'm guessing none of you actually did when you clicked accept on the contract writer I emailed last year. Clay flinched. Rishi blinked like I just slapped him with an NDA. Let's not get litigious, Clay muttered, already sweating. I leaned in. Litigious would require you owning the codebase you deploy to production, which you don't. You own a license to trigger scripts that live on my servers through a provisioning layer owned by a legal entity you never vetted. Rishi finally spoke. You tricked us. I followed your instructions, I corrected. Quick vendor. Temporary solution. We'll replace it later, remember? Clay muttered something about breach of trust. I raised an eyebrow. You mean like when you quietly demoted me, locked me out, and tried to wipe my commits from the internal repo? Or when you let Lisa harmonize my title without even a performance review? Lisa cleared her throat like she was choking on her own mediocrity. This isn't personal, Jules. This is about compliance. Oh, honey, I said, sweet as a loaded gun, so is my invoice. The screen went silent, tense, and then click. A new window opened on my end, an alert from the Larkspur dashboard. High usage spike from IP block 35.192. XX CI/CD trigger event. Manual deploy, I smirked. Looks like you're still using Larkspur right now, I said. Should we call that another 5 billable hours or just round it to 10 for the stress? Clay's voice cracked. What do you want, finally? Payment, obviously, and a public correction of my title in the company records. Retroactive. Apology? Also, anyone who replaces me gets onboarded by me, at my rate. Lisa gasped. That's extortion. I shrugged. That's DevOps. I ended the call. Let them sweat, because they hadn't even begun to realize the full extent of the dependency web I'd wrapped around their precious systems. And there were still 2 critical vulnerabilities only I knew about. Well, for now, I gave them 3 days. 3 days of polite follow-ups, templated invoices, and 0 emotion. Let them think I'd plateaued. Let them believe I was bluffing, just another disgruntled junior hoping for hush money. Day 1, they ignored me. Day 2, they looped in someone named Elijah, a cloud security consultant with a Gmail address and a Calendly link in his signature. Elijah emailed me directly, subject line in all caps, urgent. Larkspur infrastructure takeover, request he asked for temporary root access to validate integrity of handoff. I didn't respond. Instead, I added Elijah's IP to the Larkspur auto-throttle firewall. Every attempt over 3 requests per second got rerouted to a dummy staging server filled with corrupted Kubernetes manifests and a README that said, maybe respect women in tech next time. Day 3, they caved, or so I thought. At exactly 9:14 a.m., a payment for $67,500 landed in Larkspur's business account. No memo line, no apology, just a transfer from their holding firm. I refreshed the dashboard. Their Jenkins instance quieted down. Their Slack panic thread went dead. I waited. Then, just past midnight, the system hiccuped. An automated alert pinged me. Foreign deploy detected. CI/CD script mismatch with known hashes. They tried to bypass me. Smart in theory, dumb in practice. Because what they didn't know was that I'd hard-coded a dead man's switch into the pipeline 6 months ago, back when Lisa started attending those org restructuring meetings without inviting engineering. The moment they attempted an unsanctioned update without my hash signature triggered the failover cascade I'd named Tea Party YAML. A nod to what happens when the underpaid decide they've had enough. Within minutes, all Helm charts reverted to last year's versions. Their TLS certs expired, intentionally. The production load balancer rerouted 90% of East Coast traffic to a legacy beta environment that displayed a login form with my face on it. Every deployment attempt now returned a status message. Error 451, service unavailable for jerks. At 12:47 a.m., Clay called me. I didn't answer. At 12:48 a.m., Rishi texted, "This is sabotage." I replied, "This is documentation." They forgot who built the castle. And worse, they assumed I didn't remember the secret passages. By 3:22 a.m., they shut everything down. At 3:27, I got a screenshot from an old QA tester I'd once mentored. He'd been in a different Slack thread, buried under #reorg 2024, and someone had posted a spreadsheet titled Post Jules Hiring Plan. The first line, replace Jules with Elijah. Target salary, $82K, $82K. For a man who couldn't even bypass a honeypot, they wanted to erase me, cheaply. And now I was done being polite. At 7:06 a.m., I walked into the office. Not virtually, not with an access badge. I walked through the damn loading dock with a cup of black coffee and the kind of smile you only wear when you're about to light a match in a building full of gasoline. Security tried to stop me. Tried. But the third-party guards were still using a locally cached whitelist, which hadn't updated since last quarter. Guess whose name was still listed as Tier 1 Admin Engineering Override? The same name Clay tried to erase from the system logs. Poorly. I walked straight past reception, past the kombucha fridge, past that ridiculous collaboration is currency mural they commissioned from a local artist who probably cried the whole way home. The office was quiet, too quiet. One of those silences where you can feel people listening from behind monitors, holding their breath like office plants gone dry. The conference room was already full. Lisa, arms crossed, lips thinner than ever. Clay, pacing like a ferret on coke. Elijah, fresh haircut, smug smile, laptop open, clearly unaware that the silent war he walked into had already cost the company 6 figures. "Ah," Lisa said. "Nice of you to join us, Miss Wren." She used my last name like it was an insult. I liked that. "I thought I was junior," I replied, sitting down slowly, "but sure. Let's pretend we respect each other for the next 7 minutes. Clay started in, you caused a service blackout across 6 regions. Clients are threatening breach of contract litigation. No, I corrected, you caused that. By trying to brute force your way through a pipeline I clearly documented was vendor protected and SLA bound. You breached your own contract." Elijah coughed. I didn't see any documentation attached to the handoff. I leaned forward. "Did you check the README embedded inside the failover directory?" He blinked, didn't answer. "Because if you had," I said, sliding a flash drive across the table, "you'd have found the video tutorial I recorded 3 months ago, clearly outlining the SLA triggers and escalation locks. It's time-stamped, signed, and here's the fun part, backed by a digital notary. In your jurisdiction." Lisa didn't blink. "What do you want?" "Ah," I smiled. "There it is. Corporate mating call." I opened my laptop, connected to the office guest Wi-Fi, logged into the Larkspur admin console, still mine, always mine, and flipped the switch marked maintenance mode override phase Roman 2. Every screen in the conference room went black, then flickered, then filled with a bright red message, blinking in sync. "This system belongs to Larkspur Cloud, LLC. Unauthorized access is a violation of Federal Contract Code 88.4. Please contact your vendor representative to restore services." Clay nearly threw his laptop. Lisa paled. Elijah reached for his phone. I held up my hand. "Now you listen," I said, voice low and calm like the eye of a storm. "I architected your infrastructure, protected your data, wrote the policies, patched your blind spots, and gave you 3 chances to be decent." Pause. "And for all that, you gave me a demotion, a fake consultant, a spreadsheet that tried to replace me with a cheaper man." I stood. You don't get to take me lightly anymore, you get to take a deal. I opened a printed contract. Simple, direct, backdated to the original Larkspur SLA, now updated with a clause marked non-negotiable admin transfer buyout. They had one option: pay the buyout and keep the keys, or let Larkspur retain ownership and spend the next 6 months watching every release fail one by one. Price, $750,000. Payable in 15 days. Lisa's voice cracked. You're insane. No, I said, turning to leave. I'm expensive. By noon, it was war. They didn't call, didn't email. Not a single peep from legal or finance. Just silence thick enough to chew on. The kind that makes you check your windows twice. At 12:43 p.m., I got a push notification from one of my old monitoring demons, one they should have decommissioned, but didn't because Rishi never learned how cron jobs worked. Alert, new subnet activity detected. Possible system clone in progress. IP origin, internal, device name, Phoenix Broad Backup v3. They were trying to fork the entire infrastructure. They had guts, I'll give them that. You'd think after a public blackout and a red-screened humiliation ritual, they'd crawl back with wired funds and tail between legs apologies. But no, they were still betting I'd blink first, so I let them try. I spent the next 4 hours watching Elijah and his Phoenix recovery team scramble around like drunk squirrels in a data center. They were scanning repos, lifting Docker images, and attempting to recreate the CI/CD chain, except they missed one critical fact. Nothing they pulled would execute without the Larkspur provisioning layer, which authenticated through a certificate. That expired the moment I initiated Phase Roman 2. But I wasn't going to stop them. Not yet. At 5:22 p.m., another alert. Unauthorized Terraform apply detected. Attempted state write to AWS region East 1. Response, permission denied. Owner mismatch, Lark 0x231A. They were now poking the bear directly, which was perfect because every unauthorized deployment attempt triggered a kill switch embedded deep in the infrastructure that executed an obfuscated rollback script and quietly pinged my private endpoint. Every time they failed, I got a complete log dump. Every mistake, every broken dependency, every frantic SSH command Elijah typed in desperation, while his DevOps Tiger team Googled how to reverse engineer a customized deployment. And then came the final cherry. At 7:03 p.m., a Slack message leaked to me from a junior engineer I'd mentored during her internship, someone they forgot I still had lunch with every other Thursday. Lisa Finance. If she refuses the buyout, we'll sue her into oblivion. Personal bankruptcy is a hell of a motivator. Elijah Cloud, we've got backup infra. We just need 48 hours. Clay CTO, I'll message AWS directly. We have friends there. She's done. I stared at the screen for a long second. Then I opened my encrypted legal folder, dragged in a few PDFs, the vendor contracts, the state filings, the chain of custody logs showing exactly when Clay signed the Larkspur authorization form, grinning like a frat boy playing startup founder. I composed one email. Subject line, intent to litigate, fraudulent system replication and contract violation, legal at theircompanycom CC. Their 3 biggest clients, whose environments were partially provisioned through Larkspur, per Compliance Clause 7b. I hit send, and then I activated Phase Roman 3. Not a blackout, not another red screen. This time, I had a new message flash across every deployment log, Jenkins job, and console window. Trust is root. You lost both. And below it, a ticking countdown. 72 hours, 3 days. If they didn't pay, Larkspur would revoke every license, uninstall every shared cert, and launch a self-erasing protocol that would brick the CI/CD backbone down to its last YAML stub. No ransom. No second chances. Only ash. By the next morning, the rats were officially drowning. They tried calling. 17 times. I didn't answer. I sent a formal offer via DocuSign that read like a divorce agreement written by a narcissist. Reduced payout confidentiality clause, so airtight it might have come with duct tape, and a mutual non-disparagement clause, as if they hadn't already tried to bury me under a mountain of gaslighting and Gmail consultants. At 10:31 a.m., I declined. Not digitally. I printed the contract out, set it on fire, and emailed them the video. Subject line, draft rejected. Smoke signal en route. By noon, my inbox started spitting fire. AWS Legal, their outside counsel. Even some VP of vendor risk who hadn't surfaced since Q1 2022 suddenly wanted to open a dialogue. But the most satisfying message, one from Pelican Biotech, their largest client, who saw my CC on that litigation warning and decided to do a little poking of their own. Hi, Jules. We were unaware our data environments were provisioned through a third party, not named in our compliance audit. Can you confirm the scope of Larkspur's access and your legal standing? We may need to pause our rollout until this is resolved. Pause our rollout. That's enterprise speak for. We're pulling our $3.2 million contract until you unfuck this. I waited for Clay's response. Didn't take long. At 3:17 p.m., he sent me a personal email titled Let's Talk Human to Human. I opened it while sipping cold brew with a splash of vengeance. Jules, I'm sorry it came to this. We all made mistakes. You were a vital part of our growth, and we should have communicated better. I'm sure we can find a way forward that respects everyone's interests. Let's not escalate further. Respect. They fed me dust, stripped my title, replaced me with a man who thought Kubernetes was a Greek island, and now they wanted respect. I replied in 3 sentences. You have 24 hours, full buyout, or I walk Larkspur into Pelican's arms. And to ensure they understood just how real the clock was, I added a 4th message to their terminal screens, flashing across build logs like divine wrath coded in Bash. Larkspur decommission protocol initialized, estimated time to critical failure. 23:59:58 they wanted to bluff. I was done playing cards. I was the dealer now, and the house was burning. The next 24 hours were a blur of desperate calls, conflicting offers, and legal threats. But the best part, they still didn't know how to play the game. At 7:22 p.m., Clay sent me an email that practically oozed desperation. His fingers were trembling. I could almost hear him stuttering through the screen. Jules, we'll meet your buyout demands. Full payment. But please, we need a week to transition the infrastructure. We're willing to work with you on an orderly exit plan. No need to damage anything further. No need to damage anything further. I stared at the screen for a moment. The audacity. The sheer tone deafness of it all. You see, they still hadn't grasped the magnitude of the mess they were in. Larkspur infrastructure wasn't just a few scripts. It was the company's lifeblood, running their entire cloud environment. If I wanted, I could snap my fingers and flip the switch that made their world collapse in on itself. Not a server crash, not a simple error, but a total system wipe. A clean slate. And yet, here they were, asking for a week. A week to transition. A week to somehow undo the leverage I'd built in months. They still didn't understand that when you mess with someone who's been sitting on the throne of your architecture, the fall doesn't come easy. I could hear Clay's voice in my head. Jules, please, you're smarter than this. Don't make this personal. Too late, buddy. I leaned back in my chair and slowly typed my response. It was the kind of email you only send when you know you have nothing left to lose. The kind of email that finishes off whatever dignity they had left. You have 12 hours. Wire the full payment. No delays. Don't try to contact me again until the funds are confirmed. If not, you'll be hearing from Pelican Biotech's legal team. Not mine, I sent it. And just as I hit send, a new notification popped up on my screen. Larkspur invoice payment confirmed, $750,000. My phone buzzed, Clay, but I didn't answer. I clicked the tab closed. They got the deal. The one they should have made months ago. One that saved their entire company from sinking into a pool of their own incompetence. They bought the keys to the kingdom, and they paid dearly for them. I grabbed my bag and headed to the door. I wasn't sticking around to see the aftermath. That wasn't my problem anymore. I was going to start something bigger, something where the power balance wasn't built on someone else's mistakes. And as I walked out, the faint sound of Clay's voicemail played in my head. Jules, please, let's talk like adults. We don't need to ruin everything. I smiled. The damage had been done long before I walked into that room.